So the first fight, you can definitely make an argument for Aljamain Sterling winning the first round. I can also make an argument for Petr Yan winning the first round. Aljo threw a lot of stuff at him. He worked really hard in the first round, which is why, he was winning a lot of the exchanges. So the first thing that people will most likely remember is this big knee from Aljamain Sterling, which we'll see here. He does a little switch of his stance, and then he fires up, and it catches Petr Yan right on the side of the head. Looks like a pretty good shot. But what you will notice is as Petr Yan falls away from it, he catches the leg. He goes to reach for it, and then he pressures. Now that tells me that he wasn't hurt by it. It was a good shot for sure. But if you watch it from this angle, you'll see it's even more of a glancing shot than we initially thought. I mean, that's a good shot, but he's just not hurt by it. He catches the leg, and he starts to force his way back in. So that's probably, in my opinion, the best shot that Aljo landed in the first round. He did also take Petr Yan down. Now, the stats for him taking Petr Yan down are pretty impressive on Petr Yan's part. His takedown defense is excellent. Petr Yan was 7 of 7 for takedowns, 100%. And Aljamain Sterling was 1 of 17, which is 5%. And this is the one takedown. Nice double leg against the fence. Big strength move as well. Look how he's pulling that in and slamming him to the floor. And then Petr Yan is, literally it's 10 seconds. He's back on his feet. It's a scramble and a post. He gets a bit of space. He gets one leg underneath him as Aljo starts to strike down. And there he is back on his feet. It's 10 seconds. Then he clinches him and turns him. And then he holds him for 20 seconds. Like there's a clear game plan here for Petr Yan. I think people thought that Aljo was doing really well, but it was because Petr Yan wasn't doing a great deal in return. This is the point now where the first round switches for me, because Petr Yan also landed a big knockdown shot. Now that is a good shot on the chin, and you see Aljo, as he recoils from it, he goes down. That's a clear knockdown. So that for me is an argument that Petr Yan could have swayed that round, because that was a more significant shot in my eyes than the knee. But that's again, up for debate. This is the other thing as well that happened at the end of the first round. Now, I think Petr Yan has a very good understanding of the rules. I think he knows what he's doing. I think he treads the edge of the rules very, very finely. There are a lot of things that he does which are like, come on, like we know you're skirting the rules here. And he gets away with a lot of it. Sometimes he doesn't though. So his split decision loss to Magomedov, so they've fought twice and Peter beat him in the rematch by decision. They're very evenly matched. They're both great fighters. Magomedov is tough, durable, never backs down. He's always in the fight, regardless of how much he might be struggling. In their first fight, Peter was probably winning. It was a close fight, but on my scorecards, he was winning. And around the last minute of the fifth round, for whatever reason, be it out of frustration or out of sheer enjoyment for violence, he headbutted Magomed. Clearly headbutted him. Like there were a few times where it was like a intentional clash of heads. There's a lot of that goes on in boxing and MMA to an extent as well. But this was a clear headbutt. Immediately the referee deducted a point and he lost by split decision. There are also lots of other circumstances though in his fights where if he wasn't aware of the rules, he would have broken them over and over again. Like there's a calculation to what he's doing. In another circumstance, this is an illegal slam, and Aljamain Sterling being unconscious at the end of this would have resulted in Petr Yan being disqualified. It just so happens that Aljo wasn't knocked out by this. Otherwise, it would have been. We could have got a disqualification earlier in the fight. And this is what I'm talking about. And there's a reason why this is illegal. And I know a lot of people are going to say the same thing. They're going to go, yeah, but what about Rose? Rose was clamped onto a Kimura. So the way that's judged by the officials, is that she opted to stay on that Kimura, which is what kept her locked into the position and ended up with her being slammed on her head. If Andrade had picked her up without her being clamped onto a submission and slammed her on her head, then it would have been a disqualification with the knockout. That's exactly what happens here, because there's no submission that Aljo is clamped onto here. And as Petr Yan turns him, it's head directly to the mat. Like, had that have knocked out Aljo, that would have been a disqualification. So this is where my point starts about the fact that Petr Yan kind of skirts the rules a little bit and he pushes his luck. It's further reinforced a bit later on in the fight because The next thing I'm going to show you is this. And this is a good signifier that he knows the rules, because there's a very fine line between a stomp and an axe kick. What you notice is that there's a pretty much straight line between his heel and his hip. That's an axe kick. The leg's swung up straight and it comes down straight with the heel. That's a legal shot. You can axe kick someone to the body and to the legs if they're on the ground. Can't do it to their head, regardless. But if at any point in this swing, Petr Yan's leg does this, that then becomes a stomp, and that is illegal. And it's a really fine line. And most people don't use this technique because it's a very risky fine line to work. And Aljo is very fortunate that this doesn't land, because that's legal all the way down. There's nothing wrong with that. It's straight all the way to the end. You can see he was targeting with the heel. So this is something that tells me that Petr Yan knows these rules, because that could have quite easily been a rule infringement, and he could have stomped, and he didn't. He axe kicked. Now, as you can see right now, Aljo's down on one knee, but he's also got an arm across, so he's guarding the knees. Now, not that he's expecting Petr Yan to knee him in the head in a down position, but if he decides he wants to get back to his feet at this point, he is vulnerable for that. But there is a point where Aljo moves his arm, and this is the point where Yan posts on his head, and that's the same position that they illegally need him in. The only point of difference is that the hand's on the floor. So my argument is that there could be some confusion around the hand being down, but it's still, in my eyes, if he decided that kneeing to the head of a person that was on his knees was okay, then he would have done it in that moment. And he doesn't. And this is the other one. And this is where it gets really quite confusing for me, because, so as you can see here, Aljo's rocked up, he was on his back, he kicks, and then reaches in for a takedown, to which Petr Yan builds a frame in front of him and stops him doing that. Gets that underhook in position straight away. Gets his hips away. Now, as he stands up here, he is immediately starting to throw this knee. You can see this knee is ready to go. It's coming up into the chin of Aljo. Now, at what point does that become a legal knee? It's there, right? That's the point where this space underneath the knee of Aljo, where his knee has just left the canvas, but that knee was already on its way. That knee was already on its way. So legal when it landed, but not when it was initiated. And then here's the rule infringement. Okay, so Aljo throws a kick, cuffs across the back of his head, and reaches in for a really sloppy takedown, let's be honest. He was very tired by this point. Same again with Petr Yan. He gets his hips away, and he gets this forklift position in so he can stop him and lift him up. To which point then, Aljo then drops to his knees, because now he feels like he's exposed. Now at this point, he is exposed to knees to the head. So he opts to go down to his knees and put a hand down so he's not exposed. Now the point where his hand comes up is now where Petr Yan decides he wants to go knee to the head. But clearly a downed opponent, right? Clearly a downed opponent. There is also a cheeky little, I'm not saying this is a theme for Petr Yan, but there is also a little headbutt there as well. Little bump to the back of the head. I mean, he treads the edge of the rules very finely. And then again, clear knee to the head. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. It was a disqualification. It was the right thing to do. It was an illegal technique. You can't do anything other than disqualify him and hand the belt to the challenger. The reason why it was made uncomfortable was because there was this long period of time where the doctor was brought in and Aljo was kind of rolling around on the floor, and if 2 minutes later Aljo was back on his feet, there was still no decision made by anybody to call the fight there, even though Aljo had clearly made it obvious that he didn't want to continue. Whether he could or not, he made it obvious from staying on the ground that he didn't want to. Like I said, at the 4-minute mark, when he was being helped onto his stool, 4 minutes from the knee to the head to the point where he sat on his stool, that's the point where Ben Askren was walking out of the octagon after he got rigor mortis knocked out. Like, you can see that the recovery from a good knee to the head doesn't take as long as Aljo took. So that's why it left a bitter taste in a lot of people's mouth, because we know he's performing. Like, we see this in other professional sports. Like, football is very popular in England. Soccer, it's not. I don't really care for it. There's too much drama. There's too much rolling around and clutching of ankles and like looking at the referee and pleading, and I don't want to see that come into MMA. It leaves a sour taste in our mouths. Like, we all know it. We all know it instinctively. Like, we have to recognize that Petr Yan broke the rules. If he is the champion of this sport, then he has to know the rules inside out. I would argue that he does. So I would argue that he intentionally knew that that was an illegal knee and he still threw it anyway. Out of frustration, who knows? Out of being in the moment, I don't know what it is. It shows a lack of professionalism and it cost him the belt, which is the right way to do it. There's no other way around it. The problem is that it's difficult to accept Aljo as the champion because we all kind of felt like that fight was starting to slip away from him. Or most of us do. Maybe I'm speaking for too many people, but I certainly felt like it was. I felt like Petr Yan worked him pretty hard in the first round. He started to push him around a little bit more in the second round, and Aljo started to show a bit of like a raggedness to his game, like he was like reaching for takedowns and kind of falling to his back, and like there wasn't like much fortitude to his posture all the way through that second and going into the third. And then like Petr Yan starting to kind of toy with him at this point, like the chest, the palm to the chest outside trip was just, I mean, he's basically taking the piss at that point. Like, you see him doing it in the second fight against Magomedov, almost as if to make a point that he won the first one had it not been for the point deduction. And had he hung on until, 60 seconds later in that fight, he would only have one loss on his record, and that would be the disqualification to Aljo. So we're potentially looking at a fighter right now that could be unbeaten if it wasn't for his lack of control in these moments. Whoever's refereeing this next fight has to be really on the ball because this is what he does. This is how he fights.